The story begins at the dawn of a new chapter in human history. For the first time, Earth had managed to make contact with the Galactic Council, a powerful assembly of alien civilizations that oversaw interstellar relations and maintained order across hundreds of worlds. It was a moment that had filled humanity with both excitement and fear. People all over the planet watched the news with bated breath, wondering what this encounter would mean for them, their children, and the future of their species. From the United Diplomatic Front, the global organization responsible for Earth's interstellar diplomacy, a young envoy was chosen to travel to the Council. This envoy was not just another diplomat. They had spent years studying alien languages, politics, and culture. They had trained in countless scenarios, learning how to negotiate under pressure, how to remain calm in impossible situations, and how to earn trust in an environment that had never seen humans before. But despite all their preparation, nothing could have truly prepared them for the weight of the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. As the envoy boarded the sleek spacecraft that would carry them across light years to the Council's central hub, a mix of excitement and nervousness filled the cabin. Outside, the planet's surface shimmered with the first light of dawn. Families gathered around screens at home. Colleagues paused their work, and children pressed their faces against windows in awe, watching the final moments of the envoy's departure. Every eye seemed to be focused on this one mission. The entire planet was united in a shared hope that humanity was stepping into a future of peace and cooperation. During the long journey through space, the envoy spent hours reviewing notes and simulations. But they also allowed themselves quiet moments to reflect. They thought about the people they were representing, about the hopes and dreams of an entire species, and about the enormous responsibility they carried. They thought about the stories of past explorers, of humans who had dared to leave the planet and seek new knowledge, and they felt a quiet pride in continuing that legacy. Yet a shadow of doubt lingered. The Galactic Council was a mysterious and powerful body. Humans had barely scratched the surface of what they knew about it. Would the Council accept Earth as equals? Or would this mission end in failure, leaving humanity exposed and vulnerable? When the spacecraft finally approached the Council's hub, the envoy could see it hovering in space like a city of light and metal, larger than anything Earth had ever built. Ships from countless alien civilizations moved gracefully around it, each one representing a different species, culture, and set of priorities. The envoy felt a mix of awe and anxiety. This was a place where countless conflicts had been prevented, alliances had been forged, and decisions had been made that shaped entire galaxies. And now, a human stood among them, about to speak on behalf of the entire planet. Upon entering the hub, the envoy was immediately struck by the diversity of beings surrounding them. Some were humanoid, with features similar enough to humans to be comforting. Others were completely alien, with shapes, colors, and forms that challenged human imagination. Each being moved with confidence and purpose, their eyes, or the closest equivalent, watching the newcomer closely. It was a scene that could have been intimidating if not for the envoy's steady training. They reminded themselves that their role was not to blend in, but to represent humanity, to speak truthfully and with dignity. The first days were filled with protocol, introductions, and observation. The envoy had to learn how to navigate the intricate social and political systems of the Council. Every gesture, every word, and even the timing of a blink could carry meaning. At first, it seemed overwhelming. Some members of the Council watched with curiosity, some with polite detachment, and some with subtle suspicion. The envoy realized that understanding the true intentions of these beings would require patience, intelligence, and a keen sense of observation. During quiet moments, the envoy sent messages back to Earth. People were eager for updates, for glimpses into this alien world. They described the hub's architecture, the various species, and the extraordinary technologies they had seen. But beyond these observations, they shared their impressions of the political environment. Tensions existed, subtle and unspoken, that could threaten the mission before it even began. Certain factions seemed to doubt humanity's readiness, questioning whether Earth had the maturity to participate responsibly in interstellar affairs. Others were cautiously optimistic, curious about what humans might bring to the table. As the envoy prepared for their first official meeting with the Council, they thought about the stakes. This was not just about treaties or trade agreements. It was about recognition, respect, and survival. Humanity had long dreamed of exploring the stars, of learning from other civilizations, and of participating in a larger galactic community. Now, all of that depended on a single mission, and the envoy knew that mistakes could carry consequences far beyond personal failure. On the day of the first session, the council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. The envoy stepped forward, their voice steady despite the pounding of their heart. Cameras, recording devices, and observers from across the galaxy captured every movement and word. The envoy began by introducing Earth, explaining the planet's culture, achievements, and aspirations. They spoke about humanity's struggles, its successes, and its desire to learn and cooperate with other civilizations. Despite their careful preparation, the envoy quickly realized that the council was far more complex than any simulation could convey. Questions came from all directions, some polite and curious, others sharp and skeptical. Certain members challenged humanity's intentions, questioning whether Earth could be trusted with knowledge and technology that could impact multiple worlds. The envoy responded with patience and honesty, knowing that even a single wrong word could tip the balance. Hours turned into days, and the envoy continued to navigate the intricate web of council politics. Friendships began to form, fragile alliances built through conversations and shared goals. Yet there was always an undercurrent of tension, a sense that not everyone welcomed humans' presence. The envoy learned to read the subtle signals: a raised eyebrow, a pause in speech, a shift in posture. Each sign revealed the hidden currents of power and influence within the council, and the envoy adapted, learning to act with both courage and caution. Back on Earth, the world watched with fascination. News networks covered the envoy's every move. Scientists speculated about alien technology, and children dreamed of becoming the next generation of interstellar explorers. Humanity felt connected in a way that had never happened before. For the first time, people around the globe shared a single vision: that humans were stepping into a larger universe, and that their envoy carried their hopes with dignity and care. As the first part of the mission came to a close, the envoy had achieved small victories. They had earned the respect of some council members, avoided major missteps, and gathered critical information about the political landscape. Yet they also knew that this was only the beginning. Greater challenges awaited, ones that would test the resolve, intelligence, and courage. The envoy remained vigilant, aware that every moment could shape humanity's future in the galaxy. Through it all, one truth remained clear: this mission was more than diplomacy. It was a test of humanity itself, chance to prove that the species could rise above fear, uncertainty, and prejudice to take its place among the stars. And as the envoy looked out at the endless expanse of space from the Council Hub's observation deck, they felt a quiet determination. They would do everything in their power to honor Earth, to protect its people, and to show that humanity was ready for the responsibilities and wonders of the galaxy. The envoy had entered the Council's hub with a mix of awe and determination, ready to represent Earth's hopes and dreams. But after the initial meetings, it became clear that not all members of the Galactic Council welcomed humanity with open arms. Behind the polished doors, in chambers lined with alien symbols and soft glowing lights, whispers and quiet discussions revealed that some powerful factions were suspicious of humans. The envoy had expected some skepticism, but the depth of it surprised them not at first. The envoy noticed it in subtle ways. During discussions, certain council members would ask pointed questions, often framed as polite inquiries, but underneath lay sharp suspicion. How can we be sure Earth understands the responsibilities of interstellar technology? One member asked. Another commented, "It seems Earth is ambitious, but is it prepared for the consequences?" The envoy answered patiently, sharing humanity's progress, efforts to maintain peace, and the desire to cooperate. Yet every answer seemed to prompt more questions, more scrutiny. The envoy soon realized that the council's doubts were not just about capability, they were about control. Some species feared that humanity's rapid development could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Earth's technological advancements, although primitive by some interstellar standards, had shown potential that others saw as a threat. These factions whispered among themselves, debating whether humans could be contained or manipulated, or whether they needed to be limited before they caused unintended chaos. At the same time, there were other members of the council who were intrigued by Earth. They were curious about human culture, music, art, and ways of thinking that were unlike any other species. They asked the envoy questions about human emotions, about creativity, about morality and ethics. These sessions were calmer, almost friendly, and gave the envoy hope that not everyone was against humanity. They saw small gestures of support, a nod during a meeting, a quiet word of encouragement, or even a shared laugh when the envoy described an Earth custom. But the tension never fully disappeared. During private meetings, some council members made veiled threats, implying that humanity's mission could fail if certain rules were broken. The envoy quickly learned that the council operated under a complex set of traditions and hidden laws, many of which were never written down. Breaking them, even unknowingly, could be seen as an offense serious enough to justify punishment. The envoy had to be careful, balancing honesty with diplomacy, never revealing too much about Earth's weaknesses, but also never appearing deceitful. One day, while reviewing notes alone in a quiet chamber, the envoy received a coded message from Earth's delegation. It was brief and tense. Reports suggest council factions are divided. Some may see Earth as a threat. Remain cautious. The envoy felt a chill. They had known this mission would be challenging, but the reality of political games and hidden agendas was heavier than anything imagined. They realized that the council meetings were more than discussions. They were tests of patience, intelligence, and moral courage. The envoy decided to approach the situation strategically. Instead of confronting suspicion directly, they focused on building relationships with those who seemed open-minded. They asked questions about the council's goals, listened carefully to concerns, and acknowledged mistakes humans had made in the past. Slowly, trust was built with some members, though it remained fragile. It was a delicate dance. Too much assertiveness could provoke hostility, while too much compliance might be seen as weakness. Despite these efforts, the envoy could sense the tension rising. During one particularly important session, a council member accused humanity of overstepping boundaries by exploring space without formal approval. The envoy explained Earth's curiosity and desire for knowledge, emphasizing that humans never intended to interfere with other civilizations. However, some council members dismissed the explanation, hinting that humans were naive at best and dangerous at worst. The envoy remained composed, knowing that losing control of their emotions could be disastrous. Outside of the meetings, the envoy explored the hub cautiously. They observed alien technology, marveled at advanced communication systems, and watched interactions among species from across the galaxy. It became clear that the council was as much about influence and alliances as it was about law and order. Certain species seemed to dominate the discussions, while others quietly observed, waiting for the right moment to speak. The envoy realized that understanding these dynamics was crucial. One wrong alliance or misstep could result in alien perceptions of Earth as a threat rather than a partner. In the evenings, when the official sessions ended, the envoy took quiet walks along observation decks that looked out into the vastness of space. They reflected on humanity's place in the galaxy, the fragility of trust, and the weight of responsibility they carried. The stars stretched infinitely before them, beautiful yet indifferent, reminding them that the Council's decisions could shape the lives of billions. Yet the envoy also felt a spark of hope, believing that honest dialogue and careful diplomacy could lead to a brighter future for humans and others alike. During these walks, the envoy met individuals from other civilizations who were quietly sympathetic. A scholar from a water-based species shared stories of their world's challenges and offered advice about navigating complex political structures. A young engineer from a metallic species described the importance of observation and patience in council matters. These informal conversations became a lifeline for the envoy, providing insight and perspective that formal sessions could never offer. Even with small victories, tension lingered. Rumors began circulating that some factions were plotting against humanity, not out of malice, but to maintain control and protect their interests. The envoy could sense it in subtle ways. Meetings that were delayed, sudden changes in agendas, whispered conversations that stopped when humans entered. Each day felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm, with every action carefully weighed for consequences that might not be immediately visible. At the same time, the envoy received messages from Earth filled with encouragement and warnings. Leaders emphasized the importance of remaining calm, measured, and clear. Scientists and citizens shared ideas about how to demonstrate humanity's value, emphasizing that knowledge, creativity, and ethical decision-making were powerful tools. The envoy absorbed this support, using it to maintain focus even in moments of doubt. One turning point came when the envoy was asked to participate in a debate about interstellar law. Representatives from multiple civilizations presented conflicting views about the limits of exploration, the responsibilities of new species, and the balance of power. The envoy spoke with clarity, showing respect for established laws while emphasizing Earth's commitment to learning and cooperation. Some council members nodded in approval, while others remained skeptical. But the envoy's calm reasoning earned quiet acknowledgement. It was the first sign that humans might be seen as serious participants rather than naive outsiders. Despite these small wins, the envoy could feel the political storm building. Certain factions were not content to simply question humanity. They were seeking ways to control the outcome of being Earth's participation. The envoy realized that being diplomatic was no longer enough. They needed to gather information, anticipate challenges, and prepare for scenarios where their words or actions could be misinterpreted or used against them in private moments. The envoy sometimes allowed themselves to imagine the consequences if diplomacy failed. They thought about the grief that might sweep over Earth, the disappointment of generations who had dreamed of interstellar contact, and the personal toll it could take on them. These reflections strengthened their resolve rather than weakening it. They understood that fear and uncertainty were part of the process, but courage, patience, and honesty could guide them through the storm. As the first phase of interactions progressed, the envoy realized that the Council's hostility was not universal. While some were suspicious or fearful, others genuinely wanted to understand humanity. They formed alliances quietly, built trust slowly, and created small networks of support within the Council. These connections would prove invaluable as challenges intensified, helping the envoy navigate the complex web of politics without losing sight of Earth's values. By the end of this stage, the envoy had learned more than any book or training could teach. They understood the delicate balance of power, the importance of perception, and the way small gestures could change the course of negotiations. They recognized that suspicion and hostility were part of the political environment, not personal attacks, and that their role was to stay steady, honest, and patient. The envoy had entered the council as an outsider, unsure of their place, but they were beginning to earn respect slowly, carefully, and through consistent effort. Yet, even with progress, a shadow hung over the mission. The envoy knew that tensions were rising and that not everyone in the council wanted humans to succeed. They sensed that challenges were coming that would test their skills, patience, and courage in ways they could not yet imagine. Every decision, every word, and every interaction could ripple across the galaxy. And through it all, the envoy remained committed to one principle: representing humanity with honesty, dignity. The envoy had spent weeks navigating the complexities of the Galactic Council, learning the subtle language of gestures, timing, and unspoken rules. They had slowly earned small measures of respect, forming quiet alliances and understanding the fears and motivations of certain council members. Yet, the deeper they delved, the more the envoy realized that not everyone wanted humans to succeed. Some factions saw Earth's presence not as a hopeful addition to interstellar society, but as a potential problem, a force that could disrupt centuries of carefully balanced power. First, these tensions were manageable. The envoy could respond with diplomacy, patience, and reason. But as days turned into weeks, the undercurrent of hostility began to shift into something more deliberate. During a routine meeting, the envoy noticed subtle changes in the tone of the council. Certain members avoided eye contact, their words measured with almost cold precision. Others whispered to one another when the envoy approached. Meetings that had once been tense but civil now carried a weight of suspicion that was hard to ignore. The envoy's instincts told them that a decision of some importance had been made behind closed doors. The atmosphere in the council hall was charged, almost suffocating, and even those who had been friendly seemed hesitant to engage. It became clear that humanity's presence was no longer merely under scrutiny. It was under threat. The envoy could feel the pressure mounting, the sense that something monumental was about to happen, though they did not yet know what. Then came the day that changed everything. The envoy was called into a high-level session that had not been scheduled publicly. Only a select few council members attended, and the room was filled with an unfamiliar tension. The envoy entered, maintaining composure, but immediately sensed that this was unlike any meeting they had experienced. The discussion began calmly, with standard questions and protocol. But as it progressed, the questions grew sharper, the tone more accusatory. It became clear that the envoy was being blamed for actions they had no part in and decisions Earth had never made. The council members raised concerns about alleged violations of interstellar law. They spoke of interference in territories where humans had no presence, of risks to civilizations that had never even encountered Earth, and of actions taken without the council's approval. The envoy tried to explain, to clarify misunderstandings, and to show evidence of humanity's peaceful intentions. But the more they explained, the more resistance they encountered. Some members ignored the evidence entirely, focusing instead on rhetoric designed to frame humanity as reckless and dangerous. Outside the meeting room, whispers spread across the hub like wildfire. Council members from other factions began discussing the human question in hushed tones. Some expressed sympathy, urging caution and fairness. Others saw this as an opportunity to assert authority over Earth before humans could establish influence. The envoy could not see the full picture, but they could feel it. Decisions were being made without transparency, and the stakes were growing higher by the hour. Back on Earth, messages from the delegation grew increasingly fragmented. Communications were delayed, some messages incomplete, and the tone of each update carried a note of concern. Scientists, diplomats, and citizens alike watched anxiously, unsure whether the envoy's mission was progressing or approaching a crisis. The envoy, receiving these messages, felt the weight of the entire planet pressing on their shoulders. They knew that every word, every decision, and every gesture could shape not only their own fate, but the future of humanity itself. Tension reached a peak during what was supposed to be a routine discussion of interstellar trade protocols. In the middle of the session, a sudden accusation was leveled. Humans had supposedly acted in violation of agreements they had never signed, encroaching upon regions that the Council claimed were off-limits. The envoy immediately denied these claims, presenting detailed evidence of Earth's compliance and careful restraint. Yet some Council members dismissed the evidence entirely. Their eyes were cold, their voices final. There was no room for negotiation or compromise. The envoy felt a sinking feeling in their chest. They realized that the meeting was no longer about diplomacy. It was about making an example, about showing that humans could be punished, controlled, or removed if they dared to challenge the established order. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the careful recording of words for Council archives. The envoy's mind raced, weighing every possible outcome, every strategy that could prevent disaster. But the weight of power in that chamber was immense, far greater than anything a single human could counterdot in the hours that followed. The envoy was left alone in a secure chamber. They reviewed all communications, every report, and every piece of evidence they had gathered. It became painfully clear that some Council members were united in a plan that could change the course of the mission entirely. The envoy felt the full burden of the isolation. Despite alliances and support, they were alone in the face of a decision being made about their life and the fate of Earth. During this time, the envoy reflected on the fragility of trust. Even the smallest gesture or misstep could be interpreted as deception. The envoy thought about the lessons learned during the journey. Patience, observation, and calm reasoning were vital. But there were limits to what any one person could do when powerful interests aligned against them. The realization was sobering, but it strengthened their resolve. They knew that panic or fear could only worsen the situation. They had to remain composed, even as the world seemed to tilt toward chaos. Later that evening, an unexpected visitor arrived, a delegate from a species known for neutrality and wisdom. They spoke quietly, expressing sympathy for humanity's position and offering guidance. They warned that some factions within the Council had already decided that Earth needed to be controlled in ways that could include removing the envoy entirely. The message was clear. The envoy was in danger, and time was running out to prevent irreversible actions. Yet the visitor also offered hope, sharing intelligence about allies within the Council who were prepared to advocate for fairness and transparency. The envoy spent the next hours preparing for what they sensed would be a decisive confrontation. They reviewed every argument, every piece of evidence, and every potential line of reasoning. They practiced remaining calm in the face of provocation, reminding themselves that their role was not only to survive, but to uphold humanity's integrity. They also considered contingency plans, understanding that even the best prepared mission could face outcomes beyond their control. The decisive moment came sooner than expected. During a council session that had been framed as routine, the envoy received the shocking news. A vote had been passed, and the envoy had been declared guilty of violating council protocols. The accusations were vague, the evidence circumstantial at best, but the decision was final in the eyes of the council members driving the motion. The envoy's protests, explanations, and clarifications were met with silence or dismissal. It was a devastating realization. Despite all their preparation, all their effort, and all their careful diplomacy, they were now caught in a situation where human survival and the envoy's life was at stake. News of the decision reached Earth almost immediately. The response was one of disbelief, shock, and growing anger. Leaders demanded explanations. Media outlets broadcast updates around the clock. and citizens filled streets with protests and prayers. The idea that an envoy, representing the hopes of an entire species, could be condemned without a fair trial was unimaginable. The envoy, isolated in the council hub, could only sense the magnitude of the reaction without fully witnessing it. Every heartbeat was heavy with the responsibility of what had just occurred. As night fell over the hub, the envoy sat in a quiet chamber overlooking the stars. They reflected on everything they had learned, the complexity of diplomacy, the fragility of trust, and the unpredictable nature of political power. They thought of Earth, the people they represented, and the generations who had looked to this mission as a beacon of hope. The envoy realized that even in the face of betrayal, the mission itself had achieved something important. It had revealed the true nature of the galaxy, both its dangers and its possibilities. In the hours that followed, the envoy prepared for the next steps. Uncertain of what the Council's decision would truly mean for them, or for humanity, they focused on clarity of thought, ethical reasoning, and staying calm under immense pressure. They knew that the days ahead would be the most critical of their life, and that every choice could ripple far beyond the council chambers. And yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, a quiet determination grew. The envoy understood that even in the darkest moments, courage, honesty, and integrity could make a difference. They had entered the council hub as a representative of hope, and despite the growing hostility, they resolved to remain that beacon. Humanity's eyes were upon them, and they would not falter, even as the storm of political intrigue and betrayal gathered around. When the shocking news reached Earth that the envoy had been declared guilty by the Galactic Council, disbelief quickly turned into a mixture of anger, confusion, and fear. Governments convened emergency meetings. Scientists and diplomats scrambled for clarity, and citizens everywhere struggled to comprehend the scale of what had just happened. For centuries, humans had dreamed of joining the wider galaxy, of reaching out and forging friendships with other civilizations. Yet now, that dream seemed threatened, and the envoy, the symbol of hope and unity, had been caught in the middle of a storm far beyond anything they could control. United Diplomatic Front immediately called for calm, urging leaders and citizens to remain rational while they assessed the situation. But calm was difficult to maintain. People watched every broadcast, read every update, and speculated about what the Council's decision really meant. Was this an attack on humanity's reputation? Were humans being punished unfairly? Could the envoy survive, or was this the start of something far more serious? The sense of urgency and uncertainty was overwhelming, and the whole planet felt as though it was holding its breath. As the news settled, Earth's leaders faced a critical choice. They could continue to appeal to the Council, attempting to navigate a complex and often opaque interstellar legal system, or they could take proactive steps to protect humanity's interests, ensuring that the planet, its people, and its assets were not left vulnerable. After careful consideration, they decided on a course of action that had never been used before: the activation of the Elimination Protocol. The protocol, in this context, was not about attacking or harming anyone. It was a defensive strategy designed to withdraw Earth's presence from vulnerable interstellar regions, secure key technology, and protect citizens from potential manipulations or coercion by hostile factions. It was a comprehensive plan to make Earth resilient, to ensure that humanity could continue to thrive even in a galaxy that had shown its capacity for sudden and unpredictable hostility. Within hours of the decision, Earth's space fleets and scientific outposts were placed on high alert. Colonies on distant worlds, research stations, and trade hubs began coordinated protocols to temporarily shut down operations or enter a defensive standby mode. Communications were rerouted and sensitive information was secured. The goal was clear: humanity would remain visible and active in the galaxy, but it would also be protected from actions that could endanger the planet or its people. The envoy, still isolated at the Council hub, received fragmented updates about Earth's response. For the first time, they felt a sense of relief. Though the Council had made a sudden and harsh decision, the planet they represented was taking strong measures to ensure that humanity was not left defenseless. Knowing that Earth was actively protecting itself gave the Envoy renewed focus, a reminder that the mission was not theirs alone. They were part of a larger effort, a network of people committed to safeguarding humanity's future. Meanwhile, citizens on Earth responded with mixed emotions. There was relief that decisive action was being taken, anger that the Envoy had been treated unfairly, and a growing sense of unity as people realized that humanity had to stand together. Families, students, and workers followed the news closely, discussing what the protocol meant for their lives and their planet. It became clear that this moment was bigger than any one individual. It was a defining point in human history, a test of resilience, courage, and collective intelligence. The Envoy also noticed subtle shifts in the behavior of some council members. Reports indicated that certain factions were wary of Earth's sudden assertiveness, seeing the protocol not as aggression, but as a demonstration of humanity's ability to respond decisively when threatened. The Envoy understood that perception mattered as much as action. By taking control of the situation, Earth had changed the conversation. No longer could humans be dismissed as naive or weak. Humanity had shown that it could act with intelligence, foresight, and restraint. Even in the face of unprecedented challenges in the Council hub, the Envoy carefully monitored the reactions of other species. Some were openly supportive, acknowledging that the activation of the protocol was a logical response to the Council's treatment of humans. Others were hesitant, unsure whether Earth's actions would escalate tensions further. The Envoy realized that diplomacy had shifted from words alone to actions. Humanity's response had sent a clear message: the planet was not defenseless, and attempts to undermine it would not go unanswered. Back on Earth, scientists and engineers worked around the clock to implement the protocol. Communication systems were strengthened, energy grids were secured, and transportation networks were prepared for potential disruptions. Educational institutions and public organizations helped citizens understand what was happening, offering clear guidance without inciting panic. The goal was not to frighten people, but to empower them with knowledge and preparedness. For many, this was the first time they had truly grasped the scale of humanity's engagement with the galaxy. The Envoy reflected on these developments with a mix of pride and concern. Pride in the fact that Earth was organized, capable, and united in its response. Concern because the future was still uncertain and the Council's hostility had not disappeared. They knew that the coming days would require careful negotiation, diplomacy, and patience. Every interaction, every message, every decision could influence the outcome, and the Envoy had to remain vigilant while representing the values and hopes of their entire species. Despite the tension, there were moments of hope and inspiration. Citizens across the planet shared messages of support and encouragement, reminding the Envoy and the diplomatic team that humanity's strength lay not only in technology or strategy, but in courage, empathy, and unity. Children drew pictures of Earth reaching out to other stars. Scientists shared insights about peaceful collaboration, and ordinary people expressed their determination to protect the planet. These small acts reminded everyone involved that, even in a complex and threatening universe, humanity had the ability to act with intelligence, compassion, and resilience. As the days progressed, the Elimination protocol continued to take effect. Earth's presence in vulnerable regions was temporarily minimized. Sensitive technologies were secured, and emergency measures were in place to respond to unexpected developments. The Envoy observed these actions and understood the broader message. Humanity was taking responsibility for its own survival, not as an act of aggression, but as a necessary step to ensure that dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation could continue safely in the future. The protocol also forced council members to reconsider their assumptions about humans. They saw that humans could organize quickly, respond decisively, and protect their interests without escalating conflict unnecessarily. For some members, this challenged long-held biases and prompted new discussions about humanity's role in the galaxy. Even those who had doubted Earth's readiness were beginning to see that humans could act strategically, ethically, and intelligently. Throughout this period, the Envoy remained focused on their mission. While the protocol secured Earth's immediate safety, the Envoy knew that their role was still critical. They continued to engage with council members, gathering information, observing behaviors, and preparing for negotiations that could determine humanity's long-term future. They understood that the Elimination Protocol was not a solution in itself, but a tool that bought time, protected resources, and demonstrated human capability. The experience also strengthened the Envoy's sense of responsibility. They had entered the Council Hub as a symbol of hope, but now they were also a symbol of resilience and determination. The Envoy knew that failure was not an option, and that their actions, careful and deliberate, could inspire confidence both on Earth and among sympathetic council members. This dual responsibility to protect humanity and to maintain ethical diplomacy was heavy. But the Envoy embraced it fully as the first phase of the Elimination Protocol reached completion. Earth began to emerge stronger and more united. The planet's people had learned that in a galaxy full of uncertainty, they could take decisive, intelligent, and ethical action to protect themselves. They had also demonstrated to the Council that humans were not passive or naive. They were thoughtful, capable, and prepared to defend their interests without resorting to violence. For the Envoy, the experience was a powerful lesson in leadership, strategy, and the value of patience. They had witnessed fear, uncertainty, and hostility, but they had also seen courage, solidarity, and hope. They realized that true diplomacy required more than words. It required action, foresight, and the willingness to make difficult decisions while remaining grounded in principles of fairness, integrity, and respect. By the end of this stage, Earth had achieved something remarkable. The Elimination Protocol had not only secured the planet's assets and people, but it had also sent a clear message across the galaxy. Humans were prepared, capable, and resilient. Even in the face of hostility, they could act decisively without abandoning their values. For the Envoy, this knowledge provided a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that the coming phases of the mission would be challenging, but Earth had proven that it could rise to meet the challenges of a vast and unpredictable. After the activation of the Elimination Protocol, Earth's people felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. The planet had acted decisively to protect itself, showing strength and foresight, but the Envoy still faced challenges at the heart of the Galactic Council. Even as Earth strengthened its defenses and secured its assets, whispers of corruption, hidden agendas, and secret deals within the Council began to reach the Envoy. It became increasingly clear that the decision against humanity might not have been entirely fair or based on truth. The Envoy began to pay closer attention to subtle behaviors and unofficial communications. They noticed patterns in how certain council members interacted with one another's sidelong glances, hurried messages passed between delegates, and meetings scheduled in secret chambers away from official observation. The Envoy understood that not everything was visible in the main sessions. Much of the Council's real decisions happened behind closed doors, and power often shifted in ways that the public sessions never revealed. One evening, while reviewing intercepted communication logs and notes, the Envoy discovered fragments of conversations that hinted at a darker motive behind the Envoy's condemnation. Certain factions had exaggerated concerns about Earth, portraying humans as reckless and dangerous. But the evidence suggested that these claims were designed not to protect the galaxy, but to maintain power and influence. The envoy realized that what had seemed like a simple accusation was actually part of a larger, more complex political game, where truth and justice were secondary to control. To confirm these suspicions, the envoy began discreetly speaking with delegates from species known for their integrity and neutrality. These allies were hesitant at first, wary of drawing attention from powerful factions. Yet over time, they began to share insights and information. One diplomat revealed that the envoy had been targeted because certain council members feared exposure of their own questionable actions. Another shared documents showing that evidence had been manipulated to frame humans in a negative light. Each piece of information painted a picture of deception, deliberate misinformation, and hidden agendas. The envoy realized that uncovering the full truth would be delicate work. They had to navigate carefully to avoid provoking the factions who had orchestrated the accusations. Any misstep could escalate tensions, jeopardize their safety, or even worsen humanity's position. Yet the envoy also knew that revealing the truth was essential. If the council acted on false information, the consequences could affect not only humanity, but countless other civilizations. The envoy's responsibility was to gather evidence, document inconsistencies, and find allies willing to speak openly. As the envoy investigated further, they discovered evidence that some council members were secretly conducting experiments that violated interstellar laws and ethical standards. These experiments had been hidden from the public and manipulated in ways that implicated humans indirectly. The envoy understood that these revelations, if made public, could shift the balance of power and force the council to reconsider its decisions. But sharing this information required courage, tact, and careful planning. The envoy could not simply confront the powerful factions. Doing so without proof or support would be dangerous. Meanwhile, back on Earth, scientists, engineers, and intelligence teams worked tirelessly to monitor the situation. They analyzed council communications, reviewed historical patterns, and prepared for multiple possible outcomes. Messages to the envoy emphasized the importance of patience, careful documentation, and strategic disclosure. Earth had learned from the envoy's experience that diplomacy in the galaxy required not only honesty and integrity, but also careful observation, analysis, and timing. The planet's support provided the envoy with renewed strength and perspective. In the council hub, the envoy began to subtly gather evidence and create alliances with sympathetic delegates. They shared observations about inconsistencies in official statements, pointed out discrepancies in the evidence used against humanity, and highlighted procedural errors and how decisions had been made. Some council members began to listen, realizing that humans were presenting valid concerns without aggression or dishonesty. Small conversations in corridors, quiet exchanges of data, and informal discussions slowly built a network of support. One particularly important breakthrough came when an alien journalist, known for their impartial reporting, leaked documents indicating that the envoy's condemnation was based on manipulated reports. These leaks showed that certain factions had intentionally misrepresented human actions, exaggerating minor mistakes into serious violations. The envoy studied these documents carefully, cross-referencing them with their own observations and communication logs. The picture became increasingly clear. Humans had been unfairly targeted, and the accusations against the envoy were part of a strategy to consolidate power rather than uphold justice. With this growing evidence, the envoy began preparing a formal presentation to expose the manipulation. They crafted arguments carefully, relying on verified data, documented communications, and credible witness statements. The goal was not revenge, but transparency. The envoy understood that showing the truth could restore humanity's reputation, hold the council accountable, and prevent further misuse of power. This required patience, precision, and a commitment to ethical diplomacy. At the same time, The envoy continued daily interactions with the council. They maintained professionalism, answered questions with calm reasoning, and avoided confrontational language. This approach earned respect for neutral and sympathetic members, who began to see the envoy as not only a representative of Earth, but also a voice of integrity and fairness within the council. Slowly, the envoy's credibility grew, even among delegates who had initially been skeptical or hostile. Back on Earth, the revelation of possible manipulation within the council sparked both concern and hope. Citizens realized that the galaxy was far more complex than previously understood. They recognized that humans were not merely small players in a vast system, but active participants capable of uncovering hidden truths and influencing outcomes through intelligence, ethical action, and strategic planning. Schools, universities, and public forums discussed the implications, and people expressed pride in the envoy's courage and the planet's ability to respond thoughtfully under pressure. As the envoy prepared to present their findings, they reflected on the lessons learned. Diplomacy, they understood, was not simply about persuasion or argument. It was about observation, patience, trust, and the ability to navigate both visible and hidden layers of influence. The envoy had learned to recognize deception, build alliances, and act ethically, even when faced with threats and misinformation. These skills were not just necessary for survival, they were essential for creating lasting change and maintaining humanity's integrity in the galaxy. The moment of presentation arrived in a council session carefully arranged with allies present. The envoy spoke calmly and clearly, presenting evidence of manipulation, highlighting inconsistencies, and explaining the potential consequences of decisions made on false information. The session was tense, but the envoy's composed approach and solid documentation made it difficult for even the most skeptical delegates to dismiss the claims outright. Allies provided supporting statements, corroborating the envoy's findings and reinforcing the credibility of the evidence. Reactions in the council were mixed. Some delegates expressed shock and demanded further investigation, while others remained cautious, reluctant to admit errors in their previous judgments. Yet the envoy had achieved a critical goal. The discussion was no longer about whether humans were guilty or dangerous. It was about uncovering the truth and ensuring accountability. For the first time since the envoy's arrival, the possibility of fair treatment and transparent consideration seemed real. Throughout this process, the envoy continued to focus on humanity. Every action was guided by the responsibility to protect Earth's reputation, interests, and future. They understood that the galaxy was full of uncertainty, but that truth, transparency, and ethical action were powerful tools for shaping outcomes. By staying true to these principles, the envoy not only protected themselves, but also strengthened humanity's position and credibility. In the hours that followed, further evidence emerged, supporting the envoy's claims and highlighting the extent of hidden agendas within the council. Delegates who had previously remained silent began speaking, sharing their own observations and corroborating the envoy's findings. Slowly, the balance began to shift. The council could no longer ignore the evidence, and discussions turned toward accountability, transparency, and correction of past errors. The envoy reflected on this period with a mixture of relief and caution. They had uncovered truths that others sought to hide, and had done so while maintaining composure and ethical standards. Yet the journey was far from over. The council was vast and complex, and there were still factions resistant to change. The envoy knew that continued vigilance, diplomacy, and strategic action would be required to ensure that justice and fairness prevailed. By the end of this stage, humanity had demonstrated that it could navigate the galaxy with intelligence, courage, and integrity. The envoy's efforts had uncovered deception. After weeks of tension, investigation, and careful diplomacy, the envoy finally saw a turning point in the Galactic Council. The evidence of manipulation, hidden agendas, and misinformation had created a ripple through the ranks of delegates. Those who had been skeptical or hesitant began to acknowledge that the envoy's claims were credible. Discussions shifted from questioning humanity's intentions to examining the Council's own decisions, procedures, and responsibilities. It was a subtle but powerful shift. For the first time, the envoy realized that truth, patience, and perseverance could influence even the most complex interstellar politics. The envoy, however, remained cautious. They knew that shifting opinions and tentative alliances were fragile. One wrong word, one rash gesture, or one misinterpreted action could undo weeks of careful work. So they continued to act with calm deliberation, presenting facts clearly, listening attentively, and relying on the support of neutral or sympathetic council members. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Truth began to outweigh fear and suspicion, and fairness started to take precedence over secrecy and power. Back on Earth, the planet watched these developments with bated breath. Citizens had followed every update, debated the implications, and shared ideas about how humanity could continue to grow and learn from this experience. The envoy's perseverance became a symbol of resilience and hope. Children drew pictures imagining peaceful exchanges between humans and alien civilizations, and scientists began working on ways to ensure Earth's preparedness for future interstellar interactions. Across the globe, people felt united, realizing that the envoy's success was not only a personal achievement, but also a testament to humanity's collective courage, intelligence, and ethical strength. Within the Council, discussions intensified. Delegates who had previously remained silent or neutral began to ask questions, challenge previous assumptions, and request clarifications. The envoy presented carefully documented evidence, highlighting inconsistencies, pointing out procedural errors, and showing the manipulation that had led to humanity's condemnation. They spoke not with anger or accusation, but with calm reasoning and integrity, emphasizing the importance of justice, transparency, and accountability. Some factions resisted at first, clinging to the narrative that humans were reckless or dangerous. But the envoy's persistence, combined with the weight of documented evidence and the support of credible witnesses, gradually weakened their stance. Even those who had opposed humanity could not ignore the facts, and the conversation shifted from blame to reflection. The envoy noticed that small gestures, a nod, a thoughtful pause, an unspoken acknowledgement, began to indicate growing acceptance. The Council was slowly beginning to see humans not as naive outsiders, but as responsible, capable, and principled participants. The envoy also focused on building positive relationships with other species. They engaged in conversations beyond formal sessions, learning about cultures, values, and challenges across the galaxy. These interactions not only helped the envoy understand other civilizations better, but also demonstrated humanity's willingness to listen, learn, and collaborate. Allies began to emerge naturally, offering support in subtle but meaningful ways. From sharing insights about Council procedures to providing evidence that corroborated the envoy's findings. Meanwhile, Earth continued to strengthen its position. The Elimination Protocol had created a protective framework that ensured the planet's resources, technology, and citizens were secure. But beyond security, it had also created a foundation for trust. By demonstrating that humans could act decisively without resorting to aggression, Earth had shown the galaxy that it was serious, responsible, and ethical. The envoy's work within the Council now complemented these efforts, creating a unified approach to diplomacy, safety, and reputation. Over time, the Council began to formally reconsider its decision against humanity. Sessions were scheduled to review the evidence, examine the processes that had led to the envoy's condemnation, and discuss reforms that could prevent such manipulation in the future. The envoy played a central role, presenting information methodically, addressing concerns calmly, and advocating for procedural transparency. The atmosphere in these sessions was markedly different from the initial meetings. There was a focus on fairness, accountability, and the long-term stability of interstellar relations. During this period, the envoy reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They thought about the fears, doubts, and pressures they had faced upon entering the council hub. They remembered the isolation, the uncertainty, and the moments when it seemed the mission could fail. Yet they also recalled the small victories, the connections formed with other delegates, the insights gained from careful observation, and the growing recognition of humanity's ethical and strategic capabilities. Each step, no matter how difficult, had contributed to a broader understanding of the galaxy and humanity's role within it. The envoy's success was not only measured by the Council's eventual acknowledgement of the truth, but also by the way humans had responded. Earth's people had demonstrated patience, resilience, and unity. Citizens, leaders, and scientists had collaborated to protect the planet while supporting the envoy. The collective effort had transformed a potentially catastrophic situation into a moment of growth and learning. Humanity had not only survived, but had also strengthened its position and reputation in the galaxy. Finally, after careful review and deliberation, the Council issued a formal statement acknowledging the errors in its previous judgment. The envoy's innocence was recognized, procedural mistakes were identified, and measures were implemented to prevent similar manipulation in the future. The Council expressed respect for Earth's diplomatic efforts, intelligence, and ethical conduct. It was a victory not through aggression or force, but through patience, reason, and principled action. The envoy returned to Earth as a symbol of human perseverance and integrity. Their experiences became a story of courage, strategy, and ethical diplomacy. Across the planet, people celebrated not only the envoy's survival, but also the lessons learned about patience, observation, and the power of truth. Schools taught children about the importance of ethics, critical thinking, and careful judgment, while scientists and leaders reflected on the need for preparedness, collaboration, and resilience in facing unknown challenges. The envoy, for their part, remained humble. They understood that the victory was not theirs alone. It belonged to the countless people who had supported them, believed in humanity, and contributed to the careful balance of diplomacy, strategy, and ethical conduct. They also recognized that the galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges yet to come. The experience had prepared humanity not only to survive, but to engage responsibly, learn continuously, and build lasting relationships across civilizations. As peace and order returned, the envoy reflected on the broader implications of the mission. Humanity had entered the galaxy with hope and ambition, faced unexpected hostility, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The Council, once shrouded in secrecy and suspicion, had been challenged to act more transparently and fairly. And Earth, through thoughtful planning, ethical action, and collective effort, had secured not only its safety, but its place in the wider galactic community. In the final days of the envoy's mission, meetings with allies and neutral delegates focused on forging partnerships for the future. Agreements were drafted to ensure communication channels remained open, that joint projects could proceed safely, and that disputes could be resolved fairly. Humanity's role was no longer uncertain or marginal. It had become recognized as a responsible, ethical, and capable participant in interstellar affairs. The envoy took a moment to look out at the stars, one last time before departing the Council hub. The vastness of space was as awe-inspiring as it had been at the beginning of the journey, but now it carried a sense of possibility and hope. The envoy thought of Earth, of the people who had trusted them, and of the lessons learned about courage, patience, and integrity. They knew that the journey was only beginning, but humanity was stronger, wiser, and more prepared than ever to face the challenges ahead. Returning to Earth, the Envoy was greeted not just as a diplomat, but as a symbol of human resilience. Leaders, citizens, and scientists welcomed them with gratitude and pride. The mission had tested humanity's patience, intelligence, and ethical strength, and it had succeeded. People reflected on the lessons, that careful observation, calm reasoning, ethical action, and collective effort could overcome even the most formidable challenges. The Envoy shared experiences, insights, and strategies, helping Earth prepare for future interstellar engagement. The story of the mission became a source of inspiration, reminding people that courage and integrity could guide them through even the darkest and most uncertain moments. Humanity had faced the galaxy's skepticism, navigated deception, and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger and more capable than before. In the end, the Envoy's journey illustrated a timeless truth. Progress and survival are not about shortcuts, aggression, or taking advantage of others. They are about patience, ethics, intelligence, and collective responsibility. Humanity's story, once full of fear and uncertainty, became a story of hope, resilience, and the ability to